lacking in the trolleys were increased. The stock of this equipment were increased. The checking of expiry and the labeling of drugs and the documentation were increased due to continuous sensitization of the staff. Next, 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 next. Yes. Now the conclusion. Procedures for maintaining the checklist should be followed, which should be made visible on the crash cards itself so that the staff is familiar with all these things. Basic stock level can vary as per the requirement of the unit. This is an important cost reduction strategy also for the hospitals. Defining standard protocols aid in proper management of the cards. Type of equipment was standardized, but its layout could not be standardized in the current study due to paucity of space and resources. The priority of the staff for disaster cart, which adhered to all the protocols standards, should be followed for other carts also. However, by defining responsibility and setting up accountability for the stakeholders, the fallacies of the design and space can be overcome. Continuous sensitization and administrative support is very essential. Next, human factor engineering processes can be defined for the crash cards, which consists of visibility, grouping, and or organization. Now the gist is well-equipped. Next, well-equipped, adequately stocked crash cart plus proper management with increased accountability plus next. No, ma'am. Next. Plus standardization with administrative support will lead to effective resuscitation and increase staff confidence. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm sorry there was a discord between the rate at which the slides were being transferred, but the importance of this study basically lies in a very small phenomenon. You see, all doctors, when they treat their patients, use a crash cart. The crash cart is supposed to contain all the drugs, all the medicines and equipment which are needed to revive a patient. What was found in this study was that even in the best hospital of the country, the compliance to standards which are required in a crash cart was not even 50%. So what was attempted was that standard operating procedures were laid down, standardization of the crash carts was done, people were acquainted with the procedures to be followed, and then again an assessment of the crash carts was done. And it was found that yes, there was some improvement in the way drugs and equipment were placed, in the AMCs of the defibrillators, the way the defibrillators were placed, their maintenance, their working levels. But still, there is a lot more to be desired from hospitals if we have to improve our response to disasters. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nirupamada and Dr. Namrata for a very elaborate presentation on business continuity for the medical sector. Now we would like to invite the next delegate to make his presentation. Dr. Vijay Bhatnagar on the role of human biological monitoring in disaster management. Welcome, sir.
A relatively large amount of synthetic chemicals have been introduced into our environment, especially during the last 2 decades. The most of these chemicals come in contact through the biological system and thus posing health hazards to the living organisms. Next, please. You know, the human biological monitoring, we carried in-depth studies as far as the humans are concerned in general population as well as the occupationally exposed subjects. The biological monitoring is a tool for assessing and understanding the relationship between the exposure to pollutants and health implications. The salient objectives of biological monitoring are to prevent health impairment, secondly to assist in the assessment of risk, and thirdly to evaluate the effectiveness of control measures. Next please. The ideal biological marker is a quantitative measurement reflecting an interaction between the biological system and an environmental agent that may be physical, chemical, or biological. And there are three types of biomarkers. First one, the biomarkers of effect. Second one, the biomarkers of exposure. And the third one is biomarkers of susceptibility. Next please. Next please. Yes. The persistent organic pollutants as defined by UNEP are almost all the chlorinated pesticides, including the industrial chemicals like PCBs, dioxins, and furans. Next please. These are responsible for the impaired hepatic metabolism, reproductive abnormalities, diminished intelligence, immunosuppression, Usher-Rice disease, chloracne, and these are suspected human carcinogens. Global UNEP treaty in India is in 6th region, and we have been assigned to do the monitoring of the residues in the ecosystem of the country. Next please. Next please. The concern for developing countries as far as these pollutants are concerned, there are pre-existing states, the malnutrition, undernutrition, and infectious disease, and the multiple environmental exposures, including pesticides, indoor air pollutants, environmental tobacco smoke, lead, toxic chemicals, and hazardous waste sites. Next please. These effects are human body coupling with the persistent pollutants, industrial emissions, gasoline and diesel exhaust, occupational exposure, water pollution, and tobacco syndrome. Next please. We carried the assessment of the general population with respect to the DDT and BHC in early 80s, and the project was funded by Department of Science and Technology that was well been published. The varying amount of these two chemicals were present in the autopsy fed samples collected from the different urban centers of the country. Next please. This is the residues of DDT and BHC in the mother's milk samples. A study red colored in Ahmedabad and Delhi have been conducted by us, and this is a scenario of the persistence of these pesticides in mother's milk samples. Next please. This is the residues in human blood samples in different parts of the country. The samples were collected from general population of the country. Next please. Samples, the residues of these pesticides in blood samples of Ahmedabad. Next please. And this is the time trend. Our two studies in 1992 and 2003, that decreasing trends have been observed. Next please. We conducted a study on polychlorinated biphenyls, which is an industrial chemical. That is a family of 209 chemicals. Next please. Next please. Next please. These are used in production of transformers and capacitors, rubber and synthetic resin, varnishes, ink, paper, plasticizers. Okay, next please. Samples were collected, blood samples were collected. Next please. Processed. Next please. And the residues were detected in blood samples. Next please. In dietary food samples, especially fatty food samples, the residues were PCB and DDT have been detected. Now this photograph, the presidential candidate Yushchenko, Viktor Yushchenko, has been poisoned with dioxin in 2003, and it was detected that he has been poisoned with dioxin. Next please. Pesticide formulators, occupationally exposed subjects, we collected the samples and the results were, next please, that significant depression have been observed in cholinesterase activity, which is a reliable index to measure the toxicity of organophosphate compounds. Next please. Again, a study confined to the formulators, especially associated for production of organophosphate pesticides. And next please. The significant depression in cholinesterase activity have been observed. Next please. These subjects associated with the spraying of methomyl. Methomyl is a carbamate group of insecticide. This study was published in 1992, and after 5 days successive spraying of this methomyl in field conditions, depression in cholinesterase activity along with pesticide related morbidity have been observed. Next please. Poisoning in Jabalpur. Next please. We collected the samples, blood samples and food samples. Next please. And it was observed in the food samples in a village associated with, poisoned with endosulfan. Next please. Next please. You know, industrial chemicals. Next please. Next please. Industrial chemical benzidine is a aryl amine and widely used for the production of azo dyes. We collected the biologic samples. Next please. Next please. This is the site in DNA molecule where the DNA metabolite reacts with and products the DNA adduct. We analyzed DNA adducts in the urine samples of the subjects. Next please. This is the standard structure of standard sample DNA adduct. Next please. The samples were collected from the benzidine exposed population. Next please. This is the pathway by which the technique by which we have analyzed the samples. Next please. This is the standard chromatogram of control subject. Next please. This is the standard of DNA adduct, and this is the sample of the exposed worker in which we have observed the DNA adduct, and work has been published in 1996 in Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, USA. Next please. Next please. Metabolites, benzidine metabolites. Next please. The significantly elevated levels of benzidine were observed in the benzidine exposed population. Next please. Hemoglobin adducts. Next please. Hemoglobin adducts have also been observed in the occupationally exposed subjects exposed to the aryl amines. Next please. We published a paper, a chapter in a book. Book was published in Europe last year, and I got a mail from publisher. Next please. That publishing a printed book, they wrote me, previous one, the data below indicate the environmental impact of printing one single book, 66.38 kg of wood. So we have to make use of E. Next please. Risk, chemical risk does not respect national boundaries. In addition to this, the malnutrition, undernutrition, the exposure of toxic chemicals, and adverse climatic conditions accelerate the susceptibility of individuals to exposure of these chemicals. Next please. Our earth is finite. Its capacity to absorb toxic waste is finite. Its capacity to produce food and fiber is finite, and we are fast approaching to most of its limits. What we have to do? Next please. That we must stabilize our population. We must arrest the deforestation and exposure of toxic chemicals to our population, and for encouraging the right for life is the fundamental right. Next please. Next please. These are our collaborators from India, US, Dr. Kashyap, Dr. Syed Aruna Diwan, from US, Nat Rothman, Hayes, Laska and Jenser, and from Germany, Sebioni and Baerbuck. Next please. Next please. And I finish with the line of our late Prime Minister. How can we speak to those who live in villages and in slums about keeping the air and rivers clean when their own lives are contaminated at source? The environment cannot be improved in the conditions of poverty, nor can be eradicated without the use of science and technology. Thank you very much. Next.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatnagar, for bringing in the new perspective that is now assuming disastrous proportions and significance in our day-to-day lives. I would not like to take more time, but would like to invite the next speaker, Honorable Professor J. Bhattacharya, to make his presentation on strategies to reduce the impact of disasters caused by natural hazards in India. Welcome, sir. Would like to invite the next speaker, Mr. Naresh Jain and Anita Jain, for making their presentation on National Level Disaster Management Working Mechanism.
From last 2 days, we are listening many things. You will be surprised. This paper I had submitted 10 days before, but many things are compiled in this already. And it may be a very good document for everybody to understand that I had covered many things, right from the urban minister to the CM to the district collector. So my proposal is very different. What I want to say, that disaster management regulation must be like an election commission. It's a very different approach I am saying. Election commission. Why I am saying election commission? Because election commission is just a body which can govern anybody in the India. Any government organization, any private organization, any humankind, any government of machinery, private machinery, they can rule anybody, anytime. What is the problem? Whenever is a disaster, the district administration, everybody is helpless because they don't have the infrastructure. They can't use the private infrastructure. They can't govern the people. They can't govern the officials. So that is my proposal is very different like the Election Commission does. They captures the vehicles, they captures the people, they captures the infrastructure, and they do whatever they want. Nobody can catch, nobody can govern the Election Commission. So like the same way I want to say, this independent body must be self-powered to take action for disaster management. There should not be anybody governing them, okay? This should have the separate budget allocation. There should not be any problem for the budget allocation. It's very surprising that every disaster, some ministers moves here and there and announce some budget. It looks very funny. It's like we are the beggars. So there should be a separated budget pre-allocated for every man. It is not for the individual, not for the state. It should not go to the political parties like the Congress, like the BJP, like this party, and the people have the n number of problems. Kashmir is not getting, Bihar is getting, Rajasthan is not getting, Maharashtra is getting. What nonsense is going on? So we should stop this all nonsense. And there should be a central budget allocation for that. It should not be governed by any political person. This body can maybe asked for any help by district collector, state government, President of India. Anybody may ask for the help, but not govern. Next. This disaster management, working mechanism should have from the village, tehsil, district, state, national. That earlier speakers mentioned that it works on the papers, plan works on the papers, nothing in the reality. Papers in the big district, big state, big national level, nothing in the village. But it should start with the village and tehsil, that is very right. Next is the voluntarity of the people, designated government officials, political elected people at every stage should be involved in this mechanism. That is what in morning speaker told, that the community should be involved. This is what I want to say. This is the independence of disaster management tech shall help of people, elected person, government staff, like that. The disaster management start with the taking care of the proper communication, data collection, transport, power, earth moving, special tools, food, medical, rescue, first aid relief, final restitution, and all the things. It is not still in India. Next, please. Yeah. Still India disaster management is not successfully working, and this may help us very nicely. What is the disaster? It is wrongly understood. You have to go through my next slide, please. You can see what is the next disaster. Next slide, please. Many times it's wrongly understood what is the disaster. So I want to explain what is the really disaster. Short of the time, I am just giving you to read. Next. This is very good thing I want to say. Many times the actual disaster is very limited, but the man propagates it. Like in the riots, like in the stampede, like in the fire, accident, the real problem is very, very limited, but man propagates, and many times the media creates the culprits in that. Media propagates rather than giving the solutions. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah, this is what my earlier few speaker told. It's a concluded list. The NCC candidates, students from the colleges, schools, government staff, retired senior people from the society should be involved in this all disaster management. Next. Next, please. This is what I want to say. The training camp should be there for residential societies, factories having more than 20 workers, shopping malls, multiplexes, schools, colleges, police stations, hospitals, government offices. This has to be pre-hand trainings so that there is no panic situation at the time of disaster. Next. There should be advertising campaigns, there should be disaster management day celebration, regular communication with the electronic media. Next. The disaster management should have the standby arrangements for the transport, earth moving, cranes, ambulance, government, private fire tenders, power generators, boats, even the horses, camels, and localized animal which can be used for human and mutual movement. Emergency financial assistance. Many times the local bodies doesn't have the money, so local banks should have the tie-up with such money arrangement. Next. One more next. Also, that disaster management should team have arrangement for indirect food like it is managed in the airline services, milk dairies, water filter plants, utility pumps. All the tie-ups should be already there. Next, please. We should remove the myths in the general public. What is that we are safe and it can't happen with us because of they are having oxygen. That is in morning the collector explained like that people are not reading that there is a problem. So we have to remove these myths. Next is We can't do beyond God wish. Many people say and they don't want to do anything. Rather than positively working, they become inactive. So we should encourage them. Next is that we can't do anything. Very commonly said sentences, we can't do anything as we are not right person and responsible person, and say that designated people on act it. So they don't help and more criticize. Next please. Next slide please. So this is my summary. The disaster management is a continuous ongoing activity and part of national system responsible for developing plans and programs. So this is the common man mechanism for the common man. Thank you.
Thank you, Naresh ji, for a very elaborate presentation. And let me share that the National Disaster Management Act is as powerful as the Act of the Election Commission, and it has all the resources. The District Disaster Management Committees, National Disaster Management Committee, and State Disaster Management Committees are empowered to act, and they have been given all the finances and all the support. So it is not that it is not working, and a very elaborate inventory of resources does exist in form of the India Disaster Resource Network at the Government of India level. It is working. Thank you. We would like to invite the next speaker, Professor Bhattacharya. Hope his presentation is loaded. He would speak on strategies to reduce the impact of disasters caused by natural hazards in India. Welcome, Professor Bhattacharya.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Professor Bhattacharya with MIT University, Noida. Actually, basically, I am a practicing civil engineer, structural engineer, working for more than 40 years. Now, we had a lot of lectures. Now, who has to be blamed and all, we are trying to find out. I think our community has to be blamed most. Why I am telling all this thing, my topic name is also like that. Actually speaking, disaster is nothing but a hazard converted into the disaster. This whatever is happening, it will not create a disaster unless something fallen and something has taken life or property. So we the civil engineer, those who are involved, next slide. We are all involved in that, and now I will try to find out that what all has happened. Actually, why I am talking more about now earthquake, because what we have seen as a civil engineer who are supposed to build the building and which got collapsed and all, if building can withstand the earthquake, whatever comes in the earth, then whatever we are talking about, tsunami, floods, other hazards, they all can withstand that thing. And that is how life can be saved. So this I have given some statistics, how various earthquakes has happened. Next. Now, what is the response of building during earthquakes? I have tried to elaborate. This our engineering terms. You can just go through. Then various factors related to damage during earthquake. How it has happened, how it is happening. It is all from engineering angle. You can quickly go over it. Hazards effects in various during recent disasters. We have seen that how most of the building, like a pack of cards, in Gujarat earthquake, all multi-story building, they are looks like a 5-star hotel. They all collapse. I'll show some photographs because of our engineering failure, and that is how a lot of life and property has gone. So in general, it is seen, yes, which yesterday also I think Chief Minister was telling, RCC frame structures we find if it is constructed properly, it can withstand tsunami, it can withstand everything. And of course, other things, other problem, reduction of impact, how we can do, better disaster management, use alternative source of energy, prevention is better than cure. We have to think on that line. Because what we are talking most of the time, that when disaster happen, how to mitigate. No, we have to take precaution on that. Why disaster hazards should convert into a disaster at all? It is our engineering failure most of the time. And then disaster risk reduction, I have jotted down what all it can be done. But all this thing can be done. Only thing, yes, some amount of money is involved, but if we are doing everything above board, I think money is not a big issue also. What does future hold? If things are not taken care of, we have to be a little bit careful now. Increasing disaster risk, actually hazard will go on increasing. Let us be very clear on that. That our tsunami will be more, our earthquake will be more, it is a fact of life. So we have to prepare ourselves. Increasing population density, slide, little, 1 second. Increasing disaster risk, increasing population density. Population density means what? If any disaster happen, hazard happen, effect will be much higher. Today, in village, it may not be more. When you are talking about multi-story building, 100 flats are there, one disaster means building gone means few thousand people are gone. Increased settlement in high-risk areas, increased technological hazard dependency, increased terrorism, which is a part of our life now, aging population, emerging infectious disease, etc., etc. Next. Now, what is the lesson learned? Based on various things, what is to be done? I have jotted down, because my previous teacher, previous speaker has spoken something, but I have done a little bit more elaborate. Lack of effective coordination among various agencies involved. Lack of interagency flow of information, lack of transparency, accountability, which is a must. Next, delays in release of material fund, thereby ultimate suffering of the people affected. Bureaucratic management approach that is top-down, not integrated, peaceful, roles and responsibilities are not well defined. Who has to be blamed? Which I spoke earlier also. We have to define, this man is responsible, well, if something happens, he should be hanged. That is the way we should go out. Past experience are not institutionalized. Past experience in DM is not institutionalized. That is a very relevant issue. Piecemeal, what is happening, we are trying to find out that why it has happened, how it has happened, then we forget about also. Lack of comprehensive disaster management plan at national, state, district, local levels. Next. Lack of public participation in reconstruction programs. Lack of effective rehabilitation policies and programs. People's attitude and behavior is casual and directed to short-term gain. Failures of professional. We, the engineer, architect, we have failed miserably in a lot of cases. Builders are not accountable. Failures of planners, they cannot plan properly. Next. Then other lesson learned, in a sense, that is our engineering side. We have seen what we have observed. I have written here that the construction of multi-story building with open space meant for parking and all, we have seen that it is like a pack of cards, it goes off. Zoning, provision of IS code require regular revision, updation. No place now deemed to be totally free from all this earthquake and other things. The building are to be defined and checked accordingly. Next. The banning of construction of load-bearing, random double demolition, all which is causing havoc. To ensure quality of original construction as per codal provision. One more thing is there, I just want to mention, as an engineer, it is my job to caution everybody. A lot of buildings we constructed 30 years, 40 years back. Now most of them require now retrofitting. You have to strengthen them if you want to save your life, which is not happening in India, unfortunately. Training of building professionals, including inclusion of subject of disaster management at various levels, requires serious consideration. Comprehensive national plan, separate ministry. This is my own proposal that one ministry should be created. Our earlier speaker was telling that all should not be there, but we cannot. Our system is there, democratic system. Politician will be there, everybody will be there. You cannot get out of it. Separate new ministry can be there. Home Guard, NCC personnel need to be trained. DM aspect should be followed strictly. Identification, networking of existing center of excellence, involvement, active participation of community. All state governments should recognize their DM mechanism. Formal mechanism to coordinate activities of various NGOs. We have got various NGOs, but it has to be somehow coordinated. Alternative means of communication, etc., which was talked earlier also. There is an urgent need of careful study of all existing buildings, which I told earlier also, and so that whatever strengthening is required to establish credible R&D organization, research and development. We have to find out alternative method, how it can be improved and all. Central government should publish and circulate all lessons learned in post-disaster. Existing warning system, including infrastructure in disaster-prone area, need to be improved. There should be synergy between armed forces, civil administration, armed forces in a big way involved, but there has to be some synergy between two. I'll show just quickly some photographs of Gujarat, what has happened, you see. Just, I'll not comment on anything, you just see. Like a pack of cards, all good buildings, good finish, everything has gone. The very unfortunate thing is happened, but it will happen more because unfortunately, lesson learned is not, as on today, I am staying in Delhi, I must say a lot of experts, those who are opining now, even in court they have told, in Delhi, if zone 4, what we are anticipating earthquake takes place, more than 50% building will be go off. That means you imagine what amount of disaster is likely to happen. So any caution only. We can try if we are convinced that yes, there is a requirement, something should be done. We all should try to energize ourselves and see how collectively we can save our future disaster. Thank you very much for patience hearing.
You are. Thank you, Professor Bhattacharya, for a very elaborate presentation. In fact, we are all very worried because our studies after the Lakshminagar collapse, a Supreme Court constituted committee was formed to look into the rapid visual assessment, rapid visual screening of buildings in Delhi. And we found that more than 70% of the buildings in Delhi are not disaster resilient. The buildings, he also spoke of Bhuj. We did a capacity assessment across the nation with respect to disaster management. We found that buildings in Bhuj post-earthquake were resistant to earthquakes, but they were highly prone to fire and floods now. So this is a critical issue. Capacity building in this field is a critical issue, and we need to train the masons because they are the ones who translate plans into reality. Thank you, sir, for elaborating. Now I would like to request the next speaker, Mr. Devendra, to make his presentation on the Disaster Management Act, socio-legal analysis.
Very good afternoon to everybody. First of all, I want to thank my supervisor, Professor Amita Singh, for her support and encouragement. The title for my paper is A Socio-Legal Analysis of Disaster Management Act 2005. In this paper, I have tried to analyze the legal provisions in a generic sense with a focus on the vulnerable sections of the society. Disaster have been defined variously by the different scholars and agencies. According to the definition provided by Government of India and United Nations Development Program, a disaster is defined as the product of a hazard such as earthquake, flood or windstorm coinciding with a vulnerable situation which might include communities, cities or villages. The Disaster Management Act 2005 of India defines disaster as a catastrophe, mishap, calamity or grave occurrence affecting any area arising from natural or man-made cause, or by accident or negligence which results in substantial loss of life or human suffering or damage to the destruction of property or damage to the degradation of the environment. It also talks about the, which I want to focus upon, the analysis which assumes that disasters are something out of the ordinary, not part of the normal social processes, and only when they occur do these affected respond to that. The need to return to the normalcy, which was how it was before the disaster occurred, is stressed in the form of the analysis. As an alternative to this view of disaster, there is another view of another point of view that rests on the vulnerability framework, on which I am focusing upon. Which argument is, in certain situations it is difficult to differentiate between the normal life and the disasters. The emphasis is put on the social system which makes people vulnerable to the disasters. Therefore, the whole system is such that even normal life has various hazards in it and prone to risk and disasters which do not come as a sudden event under this Disaster Management Act. The major legislation which governs disaster in India is the Disaster Management Act, which is a central act. It makes natural disaster management largely the responsibility of the state government. The state government will have to undertake the responsibility of rescue, relief and rehabilitation, and the disaster will be managed under the direct supervision of the concerned nodal ministries and the departments. However, the central government with its resources, physical and financial, does provide the needed help and assistance to the relief efforts. The role of the central government is supportive in terms of the supplementation of the physical and financial resources. When we talk about the implementation of the Disaster Management Act 2005 at the national level, there are different bodies for disaster management activities. These are the Disaster management divisions with the Ministry of Home Affairs, the National Institute of Disaster Management and Autonomous Institute, which works under the central government. There is another crisis management group which was set up by the union government to advise, guide, supervise, and coordinate relief measures in the affected areas. There is also an inter-ministerial coordination group, and depending upon the type of the disaster, a nodal ministry is assigned the task of coordinating all the activities of the state and district administration and other support departments. At the state level, the responsibility of disaster preparedness and response is usually delegated to the relief and the rehabilitation wing of the Department of Revenue. The Crisis Management Committee at the state level is headed by the Chief Secretary with the participation of all the related agencies. Most of the states have relief commissioners who are in charge of the relief measures. Of late, some states like Maharashtra and Uttaranchal have set up Department of Disaster Management. At the district level, coordination and review committee is headed by the district collector. The district collector is responsible for the relief and rescue operation at the district level. The actual day-to-day work of the administering relief or implementing contingency plans for the disaster mitigation at the field level is the responsibility of the district collector. The existing mechanisms are not adequate to provide an effective and specialized leadership to the disaster management activity in the country. The government approach on the disaster policy, strengthening of administration, and basic framework for the management itself is faulty. The absence of an integrated national policy has led to the overlooking some of the vital aspects of the disaster management. For this, we need a system approach involving all concerned agencies. There is also a need to develop a uniform and specialized scheme of administration which is competent enough to give leadership for the disaster management activity in the country. Moreover, the Disaster Management Act 2005 squarely ignores the special needs of the vulnerable community, which are socially and educationally backward. It has been provided by various studies that poor communities, which mostly comprises of scheduled castes, are more vulnerable because they reside in the poorly built houses. They are badly hit by the disaster of all kinds, let it be floods or earthquakes, etc. As they are mostly uneducated, they are also unable to understand the early warning system, etc. Similarly, another
Devendra, can you please conclude?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Similarly, another vulnerable group is women. Women are also prone to the disaster, more prone to the disaster than men. Women are made more vulnerable to disaster through their socially constructed roles. As explained by Ellen Anderson, quote, gender shapes the social worlds within which natural events occur, unquote. Women are tied down by the gender roles ascribed to them by the society. They are responsible for the children and elderly people at home and are doubly burdened. Women themselves, being vulnerable, are left destitute in the case of destruction of their homes and become far more vulnerable to the hazards. Many families are forced to relocate to shelter. Inadequate facilities for simple daily tasks such as cooking means that women's domestic burden increases at the same time as her economic burden, leaving her less freedom and mobility to look for the alternative sources of income. The migrant from the lower strata moves to find work in the city without any specific ability. He is seldom in a position to support the village-based family, which maintains itself with whatever work is available in the village. The woman who is left behind becomes the head of the family, and in this situation, it has been suggested that women who are left behind when men migrate may suffer a double impact from the male migration. They may be left waiting for money that may never arrive, as the general literature around migration suggested. Some men may never send money. So that I want to conclude my paper, the Disaster Management Act 2005. The Disaster Management Act 2005, however, ignores all the special needs of the vulnerable communities, which I have discussed very precisely. It merely gives an institutional framework and just deals with the disaster management without paying special attention to the special needs of the communities. whether the communities are the socially and educationally backward classes or the women. The country needs a proactive disaster management act. Community inclusive disaster sensitization, preparedness should be given top priority in order to counter disaster. This can be achieved primarily by inculcating disaster management education in schools, appropriate higher educational institutions, NGOs, etc. These will become harbingers of important messages to home and communities and will go a long way in making the present and future generations a knowledgeable community, helping prevent hazards from becoming disasters. Thank you.
Thank you, Devender, for a very elaborate presentation.
So finally, my PPT is up, and it's called Remembering Durkheim, a Sociological Perspective on Disaster Risk Reduction in India. The reason why I have taken up Durkheim is precisely because I am a student of sociology, basically. I have done my BA and MA in sociology, so I have tried to incorporate sociology into disaster risk reduction studies. Why Durkheim is important for us, we'll get to know by and by. As we all know, India is plagued with disasters every year, hydrometeorological disasters like floods, cyclones. And we have both measurable damages and non-measurable damages. Not all damages can be measured. And therefore, disaster risk reduction becomes very important for us. So risk assessment becomes superiorly important. According to UNISDR, the definition of DRR, or disaster risk reduction, is theoretical and practical approach